Welcome, everyone. We are here today from Indeed to talk to anyone who is interested a little bit about what's been going on for the last couple of months with the outbreak of COVID-19 and how we have been responding as individuals and also as a company. My name is Chris Hyams. I'm the CEO of Indeed. I'm here today with Paul Wolfe, who is our Senior Vice President of HR. And really, this is the first of what we hope to be a little bit of a series to just open up to the outside world how we have been responding to and dealing with this crisis as it's unfolded. Indeed has been a little bit ahead of the curve for some other companies. We are today here sitting on April 2nd on day 31 of work from home. So we went work from home a little bit over 4 weeks ago. This started for us back in February, and Paul's going to walk a little bit through the timeline. And so we've been making adjustments, and obviously our business, the whole mission of Indeed is to help people get jobs. And throughout this crisis, we have spent most of our time and energy really thinking about how we can help. We look what's going on in the world outside. We don't build ventilators, but we do help people get jobs, and that's one of the things that people need right now. But we've also been going through this adjustment ourselves as a business. And so there's a number of folks here who have been absolutely instrumental in helping Indeed stay productive, stay focused on that mission as the world has been changing around us. And the person who's really been leading that effort internally is Paul. And so we asked Paul a couple of months ago to take charge of just helping Indeed respond. And so wanted to give Paul a chance to talk a little bit about how he's been doing that and how Indeed has responded. And because we're doing this from home, my dog just got up and is asking to walk out the door. I'm going to let her out. Paul, let me ask your question in 1 second. Go ahead, Martha. Okay. So with that, first let me introduce Paul. And before we dive into the details, let me just ask you, how are you doing? How are you hanging in there, and what's going on at your house?
I appreciate the question. Much like your dog, our dogs love the fact that my husband and I have been home for the last 4 weeks together. We travel a fair amount, and we have a great dog nanny that usually takes care of them, and they are enthralled with the fact that we're home 24/7. And I get interrupted in meetings all the time. The cookie jar has become a commonplace that we meet in the kitchen because they sit there and they look at it, waiting for us to give them something. How am I doing? It's a good question. I think the best single word that describes it is adapting. I'm not typically a big work from home person. I like to be in the office, even though I'm an introvert. I like the hallway conversations. I like the banter with my team. I like running out into other Indeedians that I don't see all the time and chatting with them in the kitchen or other places. So this has been different. I appreciate the fact that we as a company took actions. We're now, as you said, in day 31 of working from home early to protect our Indeedians. That is I'm grateful for that. I think the whole experience has been mentally taxing. Mental fatigue is the thing I talk about, because it's not my job. I talked to a bunch of other CHROs, and our jobs have changed. It is not this, let's think about what a new talent review program looks like, and let's implement this, or let's think strategically about our employee population and what we're doing from an HR people perspective. It is day to day, hour to hour, just decision after decision after decision, with sometimes not great information or not a lot of information at all, because the medical community is learning about COVID-19 as we all are learning about it. There's new protocols and new advice that comes out all the time. So I think adapting is the best word, but there's also this mental fatigue of just dealing with it every single day. And there's I was having a conversation with a team member of mine yesterday, and we both kind of agreed there's no light at the end of the tunnel. If you're in normal work mode, you've got projects, you may have big projects, you may have day-to-day stuff that you're doing, but you kind of know where the boundaries are and when things should be coming to an end, or you're going to be able to take a breath. And in this case, because we don't know, how long this is going to go on, what the results are going to be. I get asked a lot from Indeedians about when we're going to come back to the office. We don't know that. I think that adds to the mental fatigue a little bit. So that's my truly transparent answer to that question.
Yeah, and look, we're very conscious, and we talk about this all the time, that with whatever we're dealing with right now, we are among the most fortunate people in that we have a business that can operate the way that we're operating. Let's start by just going through the timeline. Let's go back to January. The news started coming out, and we were reading stories about what was going on in Hubei province in China. We started talking to employees about travel to China and other places like that. But then I got a call from you around 1 a.m. your time on a Friday morning in early February. And why don't you just walk everyone through kind of what had been happening before that, and how things started for us?
Yeah, February the 7th, 1 a.m. my time, midnight your time, was the infamous phone call that started all of this. But before that, we had been looking at, what was going on in Wuhan, what the World Health Organization was saying, what the CDC was saying at that time, and just kind of keeping on top of what was going on in world events as you normally would. But in this case, because it was a medical issue, kind of just keeping an eye on things. I got a G chat from DePauli, who's our VP of Global HR, probably at midnight or so New York time on the 6th or 7th of February, letting me know that we had an employee in our Singapore office whose family had potentially been exposed in a surgical facility the day before, and they had just notified us. And so, I asked a couple questions. We didn't have a ton of information. I reached out to you and Dave, our chief operating officer. I was a little bit hesitant at first because it was so late in the evening and we had just come off of a 3-day offsite. We were all kind of wiped out from that. You texted me back, and I remember my text to you was like, "Can I call you? It's going to be easier to explain this." I called you and I said, "This is what I know. We have potential exposure. One of our employees, we're, kind of keeping in touch with him to make sure he was okay. Because we've done that with all of our Indeedians now that have potential exposure. And now we've gotten to the point where we have Indeedians that have been diagnosed with COVID-19 and just keeping in contact with them to make sure we're supporting them in the right way." And you and I talked for a few minutes, and I don't remember which one of us said it, but we quickly got to, let's close the office now. And we did that. We got an email out within a couple of hours to let our employees know as much as we could. And I'm really proud of the fact that from that first email about what was going on, we were very transparent without breaching confidentiality. We did not give the employee's name. We actually used they and their pronouns versus he and she. And we were very careful about that as we crafted our internal communications. But we wanted to give as much information as we could to our Indeedians, because medical choices are personal choices. We don't always know what's going on if somebody is dealing helping a sick family member in their household, or may have their own underlying medical issues that compromise their immune system. And so we really went into this with, we need to be as transparent as possible, because not only is this impacting now potentially our business, but it could impact people's lives. And it's a scary thing. And so, we did that. And then we quickly, and I think I reached out to a project manager who I had worked with, because I had then started to shoot off a bunch of emails about different work streams that I knew we needed to kind of keep an eye on. Who's traveled to Singapore, like where are people, and things like that. And the next morning, Friday morning, the 7th, is probably like 7 or 8 a.m. I quickly realized, like, shit, like I'm not going to be able to keep track of all the stuff that's coming back to me. And I know that's not a forte of mine in general. So like, I need to enlist some help. So I reached out to a project manager. I reached out to Lisa, your chief of staff, that I'm like, I need some help. This is what's going on, kind of filled them in. And we quickly built a health crisis team. It was originally a COVID-19 crisis team. We've pivoted to health crisis team because we now have a roadmap for other health issues that may come up in the future. And we've learned a lot. We have a really solid plan of what we're going to do if something like this happens again. And so we quickly spun up this team who, as an aside, has been the most amazing group of Indeedians that I, in my 6 years here, have ever worked with. And we have we have amazing employees. Like they're the friendliest group of people by far. We hear that all the time, and I believe that. And I get it, because of my job, I'm a bit biased, but I do really believe that. But this group of people has done stuff that is wildly out of their normal job responsibilities. At one point, I had to ask Matt Colby and Jake Berg on our investor relations team to reach out to people who were about to get on planes because we were stopping travel. And we didn't want any more people getting on a plane and going someplace else. And that's just one simple example of how, like, there are these uncomfortable things that have to happen, and they have to happen very quickly. But it is this group of like 12 amazing people who have worked bizarre hours, crazy days, weekends, done things that they never thought they would have to do, I'm sure, just pivoted and did whatever they could. And so to me, I think the whole pandemic, I think for companies and for humans, I think you really see people's true colors and their core when they're dealing with a crisis. And I these are probably my best friends at Indeed right now. And I liked them all. I knew them all before then. But I know them on a very different level. Like, you see, because we're all virtual now, you see people's homes, husbands, wives, dogs, children, boyfriends, girlfriends, roommates, like the whole, like you get this deeper appreciation for people that you thought of as just coworkers before. And we all know that they're human, but now you have a different understanding about them on a human level because you're getting a glimpse into their world every single day, their home every single day, because we're meeting like this. And so that was like the first the first 24 hours. And then we quickly realized, because of so much travel that goes on between offices, that we had people that had been in Singapore during the exposure period or the potential exposure period, and that had gone to both of our Dublin offices and our Sydney office. And so then we quickly went to, okay, we're going to close those offices. And that was, this is probably that Monday, February the 10th, February the 9th. No company I hadn't heard of a company closing an office at that point, especially when you think about Dublin. Dublin, we're over 1,000 Indeedians. We're a big employer in Dublin. It's important to us. We've been there 8 years now. It's also the other thing I've learned, and I kind of always knew in the back of my head, but like any email I send, I have always thought of in the back of my head, it's like, okay, this could be published in the New York Times or the Irish Independent. And an email I sent to our Dublin employees about what had happened and working from home caught the attention of the Irish press, and that was our first press inquiry.
Which also included a picture that someone had taken from a building across the street that next day when the building was shut, with people in hazmat suits doing a deep clean of the office.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? We saw that, and in my mind, my answer to that, if somebody asked me or when somebody asked me the question, is like, we were doing what we needed to do to protect our employees. Like that, our overarching focus through this entire event now going on, we're like 8 or 9 weeks into it, has been, how do we best protect our employees' health and safety? And early on, we thought it was, okay, we're going to close this office. Then we figured out Dublin and Sydney may have had a potential kind of second or third hand exposure. Let's close those offices. And then it turned into trying to track people's travel and what office they had been in. Austin, where you are, is a great example. We've got 5 offices. People go between offices pretty frequently, and trying to keep track of all of that, we quickly realized was becoming a huge challenge for us. And somebody on the health crisis team said, probably on day 3 or 4, this isn't about containment anymore. It's just about slowing exposure is what it is, which I think the world, we've seen in what's gone on in the world too. We knew we couldn't stop it. And so, that was the first kind of 3 or 4 days of what we were dealing with and how we were dealing with it.
Yeah. And I think that was the thing that was, there are 2 things. There's a lot in what you just said there. The first one was the fact that where this started for us kind of set the stage, because it was in Singapore and we are based here in the US. You're in New York. I'm in Austin, Texas. As a global company, this is a 24-hour thing. And when something happens and a decision needs to get made, if an office around the globe is going to be opening up in the morning when it's nighttime here. We need to make a decision now. We can't wait until the next day when we can get a group of people together. So this health crisis team that you all put together was meeting multiple times a day, including evenings, including weekends. And the one thing that I have to say is really amazing, I like to think that we're good at making decisions, but I've never seen us as a business make decisions as quickly as possible and implement them as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I agree. We were meeting all times, day or night. We've gotten into a more regular cadence now, but I think that's the one thing that has surprised. It probably isn't the fairest word, but I guess maybe that I'm proud of for Indeed. Like it is, the team comes together. What new information do we have? What recommendations do we want to make? And it quickly was me or somebody on the team reaching out to you and Dave. And we had it was like, yes. Like I honestly don't think you or Dave has said no to anything we've recommended. And I was trying to think about that and prepping for this. It's just, it's, and because we've all gone into it with it. And I think that's part of it too. Just like we have this mission of helping people get jobs, and we come back to that all the time. And about thinking about the job seeker first, being one of our values, like our overarching goal here was protecting Indeedians. And I think that's part of the reason why we've been able to, in pockets of not great information or sometimes no information at all, just make very quick decisions, because we knew that the decision we were making was tying back to this principle that we had started this process on, was about protecting people.
This first occurrence was one person in one office. And just from that, so we have 2 Singapore offices. So we'd seen people from the other Singapore office had visited that office, and then people had gone to one Dublin office and the other Dublin office. And so this geometric expansion just from one person. Now we have more than 30 offices in 15 countries around the world. And so every single incident that happened along the way where there was a potential exposure, we could just immediately see from looking at where employees had been traveling or where they were planning to travel, how quickly, just within Indeed, this thing, almost within a day or two, could have potentially reached every single other office. And when we started thinking about what that looked like for the rest of the world, I think maybe that's why we started getting a little more alarmist a little earlier than some other folks.
I refer to it in one of the meetings like it's just a snowball effect. Like it is just, there's no stopping it. It's going to happen. And, we then quickly moved to limiting business travel to, I think the first piece we had was APAC only within country, in the Americas, and EMEA within region, but no cross-region travel to try and slow it down. I was going to say stop it, but we knew at that point we couldn't stop it, but slow it down. And again, protect people. And that was the focus. And then we moved relatively quickly to, and it was an SLT meeting on a Tuesday morning, which is our weekly meeting, where Lisa and I were giving an update on what we were going on. And the recommendation was, I think, if I remember correctly, to slow, kind of curtail travel altogether and have people work just in their home Indeed office, not their physical home office, but the Indeed office they're assigned to in Workday is kind of, I think, the language we were using. And it was a great, my peers, you and Dave have been great through this. My peers have been very supportive and great too. And in that meeting, I don't remember who brought it up, is like, isn't this just an intermediate step to getting full work from home?
And that was Dave, just to give credit where credit was due. We came in with that one intention, and Dave O'Neill, our chief operating officer, was the one who, suggested.
Yeah, you're right. It was Dave, the voice of reason in this case. And and we sat and thought about it. And I think the work from home, like, it's interesting because, and I think you said this a while ago, we got so used to the normal way of working. Indeed's been around for 15 years. We've worked this way. We started with 2 offices. We've grown exponentially over the last, 4 or 5 years. And we're used to people coming in offices, seeing people. We've had this, 300 or 400 employees being remote, or usually on the sales side. That's been a general thing, but the vast majority of us are in an office and have a desk in an office, and kind of, that's been the way we're used to working. And I think that's the same for a lot of companies. We're not that different. And I do think there was a little bit of fear of what's going to happen if we all go work from home, work remotely. And, some of my peers I talked to after we made this decision were like, oh, I think productivity is going to plummet. I'm not sure how I'm going to keep people engaged. I'm concerned about people. And I think, I won't speak for you, but for me, all of those things were going through my mind. Like I'm thinking about my team, then I'm thinking about all 10,000 plus employees and like, all right, like how do we do this? And Dave making the like, let's just talk about what the next step really should be. And I think this is just an interim step. And we all quickly, again, about going back to your point about quick decisions, it probably wasn't more than 10 or 12 minutes that we talked about this ESLT and got to, we're all going to start working from home. And that was the meeting on March the 2nd, which was the Tuesday. And then we quickly put together an email trying to be as thoughtful as possible, knowing that not everyone is going to like this decision. And sent that out later that day to employees, letting them know that starting on March the 3rd, which was Wednesday, that we were going to mandatory work from home. Kind of that Wednesday through Friday gave them the ability to pop into an office if they needed power cords, laptops, phone chargers, the essentials that they were going to need to work from home. I think all with the understanding is we weren't sure how long this was going to be, because the way we worded the email was until further notice. Because we still don't know when we're coming back to offices, because this is still unfolding as a global pandemic. And so it was another good example of a very quick decision without a ton of great information, with a group of 13 people or so opining on it. And then we quickly just moved to, this is what we need to do, going back to protecting our employees.
The thing that jumps out at me is that decision, like a number of others, even within that conversation, when we got to, yes, it's time to actually make this decision to work from home. And then the first proposal was, okay, well, today's Tuesday. Let's just say on Monday, we'll start working from home. And then very quickly it got to, well, if we're going to work from home, why don't we just do it now? And it was, because we had people coming into the office that next morning pretty quickly. And you wrote that email and that got sent out. I recorded a video on my cell phone and sent that out to the company. And the next morning, we did have some people coming in to pick up equipment, but probably 9,000 out of the 10,000 people were working from home starting that Wednesday morning. We had our first of our regular global Q&As over Zoom during this process. That Dave was in his home office and I was in my living room, and so that's kind of how things started. So you kind of went through the timeline to get us there. So now here's, I think, the question for other folks who might be in a similar role to you. We make this decision, you leave that meeting. Now we need to figure out how 10,000 people are going to work from home from 30 offices and keep the business moving. So what did you do? How did you figure that out? What's the first thing? What's the second thing? How do you get the right people involved? Because this is definitely not, and from the start it wasn't, but this is not an HR issue. You're leading this because it's about people and the people come first, but you have to coordinate IT and marketing, and how are the salespeople going to work at home versus how are the engineers going to work at home? So just talk a little bit about that process.
Yeah, I think the first step in the process is I freaked out when I walked into the SLT meeting. Like, shit, like how is this going to happen? Because it wasn't a dimmer switch. It was an on-off switch. It literally was like, okay, we're doing this. And it's going to be 10,000 plus people tomorrow. And so went back to the health crisis team. We expanded that a bit, added IT, some of our infrastructure folks. At this point, we had representatives from HR, recruiting, PR, IR, internal comms. I'm trying to think who else. IT, infrastructure. We probably had a couple other folks that were just like, in case we need extra sets of hands or really minds at that point. And then it became this team's like, okay, how do we do this? And so it was, all right, people are going to need equipment. We knew that not everybody was set up to work from home, or probably wouldn't be set up to work from home, but we wanted to see what the needs were from that. So we didn't do anything around that immediately. And we were very, in the communication, we were transparent about, we don't know everything that we're going to need, but we're doing this because we want to, and we keep going back to protecting, health and safety. It was also interesting that because we were early as a company in doing this, I think there were pockets of our employees, and even some of our senior leadership team have disclosed to me after the fact, now that we're 31 days into it, that they thought we were overreacting to, we were going, kind of 0 to 60 like overnight. And we didn't need to do that. It didn't necessitate, what they were reading or hearing didn't necessitate that. And it was interesting to hear some of those perspectives. Now, when you talk to those same people, it's a very different conversation. It's like, I'm so glad we did it when we did it. And as I talk to other CHROs, it's, I've been extraordinarily transparent with other CHROs who are in the same situation I was in even 9 weeks ago that are just dealing with it today. It's like, here's every communication we've sent. Here's every guide we've put together. Here's everything we've thought about. Here are some of the bumps in the road that we have faced. So that, I think HR people in general we don't want to, like, other people shouldn't have to go through the same pain that some of us go through. And so it's this naturally, typically sharing group of professionals anyway. And I've just been like doing that. I've got a group of 5 other CHROs that I used to work with at Condé Nast. We've all had different roles there, and we all still are friends. And there is a group chat that we have, and literally it's like this open chat, and they just ping with questions. And like, we all just, here's what I've done, here's what this person's done, here's what I've done, and we're sharing information. We're actually having a virtual happy hour at 5:30 Eastern time this evening, because they've all been in it now for a couple of weeks. But I think we went back into kind of our virtual war room and started to talk about like infrastructure. Do we think we're going to have enough bandwidth? Do we think, those tools that have to be VPN'd, are there any tools that we can pull in front of that firewall? What are the other things people are going to need to do? How do we put together? We put together a quick kind of, here's how to work from home. Here's how to log in. Because some of our, there are pockets of our organization where work from home is not something that is allowed because they need to be in the office. And, this was all going to be new to them. And we realized that. And we knew we were going to see a dip in productivity while people got through some of this, the change. Like, you've got to deal with it. And there's also, it's not just the tactical change of working from home and how I log in, how I set up my camera, where do I best position my laptop so that there's not light behind me, and kind of all those little tips and tricks that we've learned along the way. There's also the emotional piece of this. So, you made the statement about other kind of, these are, in some cases, privileged problems for some of us. And like, I'm lucky enough to have a room where I can close the door. There are times where I leave the door open because the dogs coming in, maybe are a good mental health relief or an anxiety relief for me. And it's a meeting with one of my direct reports or a peer, and it's okay. It's not a big meeting. But I have the luxury of closing a door. I had a desk, I had a monitor, I had a camera, I had all these things that, were conducive to me being successful at working from home. And then you start to think about, the broad spectrum of our employees and where they live and the physical space they have. If you think about Manhattan apartments, Tokyo apartments, you just kind of go through the list of smaller physical spaces. I got an email early on, probably before the end of the first week, that Friday, the 6th, from an employee that I know in the New York office, who's an account executive for us, an inside salesperson. And he's like, look, I appreciate what you all are doing. He's like, here's my problem. I live in Manhattan and I have 4 roommates in a 3-bedroom apartment. There's not really any private space. And he's like, none of my other roommates right now are working from home. Their companies still have them going to the office. So for now, it's okay. But he's like, I think that it's going to get to this point. Like, how do I deal with that? And like, that's a really tough, like, that's hard. And I think my answer, and I think I got on Zoom with him and I said, like, talk me through, okay, is there a corner, of a bedroom or a dining room or someplace you can find that's comfortable for you? Can you put AirPods in or earbuds in so that the conversation is, not distracting anybody else? And I kind of like, and I said to him, I said, I'm other than those things, I'm at a loss. Like, if you think of anything else or you get creative, like, let us know. And I think, that has happened a lot. There's been a fair amount of Indeedian sourced material that's come back to us. And I think people respect that. And, the notes that I get, and I think, and that the team gets, I think that's part of what, because there's no light at the end of the tunnel, kind of keeps me going. It's like, people are like, so grateful and so appreciative. And it's, sometimes I get emotional. Like, there was one I read the other day that was very long and very, thoughtful about the situation that she was going through and how the decisions Indeed made early on impacted her in a very positive way. And you get, I think you asked me the question, you happened to be in New York, and it was one of our syncs, and we were doing it in person via instead of via Zoom. And you and Dave have been great through this, asking me how I'm doing. Like that's usually the first question that when we meet, I get asked. And my peers have been doing that. Lots of people are doing that, and I've been doing that for other people. Like you want to pay it forward, but I feel extraordinarily supported in the role that I have. And you're right, this isn't an HR problem, but it is about people, and that is my world. But I feel extraordinarily supported, and I want to make sure I'm doing the same. And you read these notes, and even if it's I've got this challenge, like typically someplace in that email, it's like, but thank you all so much for doing this for us. And so I think that's kept, at least for me, that keeps me going. And usually there's one of those that pops up a day, and it's like, all right, like if I'm having it's a tough day, or there's I feel like I'm playing whack-a-mole, because it's just like, what's the problem I have to like deal with right now, and there's going to be something else that pops up in an hour. That's been an amazing source of comfort, energy. I don't know what the right word is. And I think it goes back to just, I think Indeedians in general being really friendly people and supportive people, even if they disagree. There's this way to disagree and still be, good human beings. And I think we do a good job of bringing those people, or attracting those types of people to our organization. I'm kind of getting back to how we thought about this. So IT infrastructure, okay, what are the pitfalls we're going to have? And then we quickly said, you know what, we need to put together FAQs. And we know the first, kind of group was maybe 10 or 12, and we know there's going to be more. And we set up an inbox, COVID19@indeed.com, not the most creative email box in the world, but it's like, look, send us your challenges, send us your questions, tell us what's going on. We also asked employees to keep us informed about if they were experiencing symptoms, or they had been potentially exposed to somebody, because even though we had started to work from home, we still knew from all the medical guidelines that there was this recommendation of a 14-day incubation period. And so if you had been exposed, the quarantine period was 14 days. And so we were still not out of that 14-day window when we made this decision to have everybody work from home. And so we still wanted to keep up with what was going on with our employees, supporting them in the best way possible. And then also letting other employees know that may have been in an office they were in, that this was going on, and they should keep an eye on themselves. And certainly our advice to anybody who wasn't feeling well was to reach out to their primary care physician, their general physician, or a medical professional to give them guidance. And so I think those were two really important things, this email box with questions, because we knew we could not think of everything. And then just the FAQs that started with these 10 or 12, we just kept refining and adding, and we've done that, for the last 9 weeks. And now we've got, this beautiful spot on Igloo, our internal communications platform, where, you can scroll through all of the questions, but also at the top, there are hyperlinks, and you can, if I've got a work from home expense question, or I've got a work from home tips question, or I've got a childcare question, you can quickly get to that category. Our internal comms team has done a phenomenal job of taking all of these emails, all of these questions, and putting them into kind of easily synthesizable ways to find them, ways to understand them, very intuitive and logical, which sometimes when you have lots of information, you kind of have to hunt and find. And I don't think that's been the case. I think we've learned a lot from a comms perspective about this entire thing. But that's kind of, that takes us through kind of that first probably week of what do we do now?
Yeah. And so the thing that is really clear in all of this is that things are changing still very rapidly. We are clearly settling in for what is going to be a longer period of time than maybe on the first few days we had any anticipation of. So I think we're trying to be also pretty direct and open about the fact that we certainly haven't solved all of these problems, and new problems will crop up. And there's one thing to make an adjustment, and then there's another. So you mentioned roommates. Roommates are one type of headache. For the folks who are parents, and I again, in the high end type problems. So I have two girls who are 22 and 24. One was living in New York, one was living in Los Angeles. They're both home. We're now, the four of us are all at home working. That's actually really easy because I've got four adults and we're taking turns cooking and cleaning and doing those things. For people with young kids at home, either who are so young that they need constant care, or school age kids who suddenly now we have people who are full-time work from home professionals and teachers at the same time. And some of those kids have additional needs that actually make that far more complex. So some of these are problems that we still are just trying to support people through. We haven't figured out. One thing, though, that has been really striking, and I'd love if you can talk just a little bit about the role of the inclusion resource groups. It just turns out, so we have a handful of them, and you can talk about that a little, but we had just launched our 10th and our first new inclusion resource group in a while, specifically around parents and caregivers before this happened. And so Sherry Wynn and the group that put that all together, they have really rallied around just creating some kind of support and resources for parents and caregivers during a time when no one expected. It was already challenging, and now it's suddenly a different level of challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad that they put in their application and that we got it through that process. Probably it was like mid to late January. If not a little bit earlier than it may have been tail end of last year. We were just getting the logistics figured out. So it's our 10th, the Parents and Caregivers Inclusion Resource Group. And then this started. And you're right. Like this is, I think I had said this to Dave in one of our weekly syncs. He asked how I was doing at the beginning of it. And I said, I'm doing okay. I said, but I am torn by the fact that we can't solve everybody's problems. And I learned a long time ago when I got into HR that I wasn't going to be able to please everybody all the time because not everybody would like all of my decisions. But I still want to, that's still what I try and do. And it's like, if there's a problem, I want to solve it. And I want my team to solve it. That's what I want us to be known for. And that was frustrating to me. And he and I had a good conversation about it. You and I may have talked about it. It's like, you're just not gonna be able to do it. So what can we do to best support? So we did quickly lean into Sherry and the leadership team on the inclusion resource group and our diversity, inclusion, and belonging team to think about how can we best support our parents. Because you're right, it's not just I've got my kids home now, and it could be they're toddlers or they're 3 years old or 5 or 8 or in their 20s, whatever the case may be. But not only do I have them home, but I'm also, in some cases, their teacher now, because I've got to make sure they follow these lessons because schools are closing. We're seeing more and more of that. That continues to be I think it may have been Washington state schools were the first ones to close. Because that was the 2 nursing homes were the kind of first.
Tokyo is actually, I think, for us.
Oh, you're right. You're right. Tokyo was the first country to close schools across the board. And so how do we help those folks? And I think the Sherry and the Inclusion Resource Group, along with our DIMB team, quickly put together this. They're calling it the unofficial guide to working from home with kids, or Indeed's unofficial guide.
DIMB, for anyone that's not Indeed and might not know what that is, you want to.
Diversity, inclusion, and belonging. Sorry, I slip into my HR acronyms. And so they quickly put together this unofficial guide to working for home for parents. And it is this laundry list. It's amazing. There are links to, things to keep kids, activities to do with them on a rainy day. I just looked out the window and it's starting to rain here in New York today. So it's like, all right, my dogs are not going to get to go out and play in the backyard today. That's been my little mental health relief every day. And so it's got all these guides. It's got kind of tips and tricks. It has your crowdsourced ideas. Here's what I'm doing. Here's how I'm teaching 3rd grade math all of a sudden, or, whatever the case may be. And then how do we support them from just a workload perspective? Because not only is it, I've got the work that I can do, and I'm lucky enough to be able to work for a tech company to be able to do it from home and get set up in the right way to do that. But I've also got to make sure they're getting their lessons done and they got the attention that they need, because you're parents first, you're an employee second. That's your family's the most important thing. But we also told all our Indeedians, don't be surprised or, put off by the fact that you're going to see kids popping into Zoom meetings, pets, kind of everybody that could be at home. You may have somebody's, internet go out during a Zoom meeting and they're going to freeze and they're going to come back, or whatever the case may be. And so practice some more empathy, some more tolerance was really important. And I think, Sherry and the IRG have done an amazing job of helping support that group. I've shared that unofficial guide with this group of CHROs that I talk to all the time. And they're like, who on your team put this together? I'm like, my team had nothing to do with this. This is an employee who she's passionate about this. She's got a family, and she realizes what the challenges are, and who better to think about this than somebody on the employee development team or an HR business partner who may not have kids. It's firsthand subject matter expert putting together, here's what's working. And I think that's the other thing is like, here's what works for me, but people know that's not going to work for everybody. And so it's just this amalgamation of all these ideas and resources that have been really helpful. And the other thing we've told managers is, it's fine to be flexible with how people do their work. Somebody may, if it's a husband and wife and they're both working from home, somebody may spend the morning with the kids, and so they may not be online right away. You may see them at lunchtime, and you may see them till 3 or 4 in the afternoon, and then they're going to spend some more time with the kids, and the kids may go down, have dinner and go down, for sleep for the night, and then you're going to see them back online later. And I think our managers, at first, it's just different. It goes back to your comment early in this process, this is not our usual normal any longer. And I don't want to call it the new normal, because I think it's a temporary normal. And I think we'll see what the new normal is when we come out of this. And I think it was just helping people understand everyone's perspective now is, and it always has been, but I think it's highlighted more that everyone's perspective on work and life is very different, depending on what's going on and all the things that anybody's having to juggle with that. And that goes along with just the personal anxiety and the mental. It's the other thing is the mental health challenges that come out of this that get highlighted as well, and trying to help when we put together a mental health guide with resources for people to just simple things like, you can subscribe to Calm and Headspace and make sure you've got time to meditate. Our employee experience team has done a phenomenal job of moving yoga and workout classes and meditation classes that were in office before. They're all virtual. And I attended one in Sydney. I was up late last night, and there was beginners, because I am a beginner with yoga. I also love the fact that nobody can see me do it, but it was late last night, and I saw the Sydney invitation pop up on my calendar. I'm like, oh, I'm going to go do it. It was like midnight or so. I'm like, go do it. And so, that type of stuff was great. And I think the other thing we learned, and it may not be specifically to parents, but for our Indeedians, is because not everybody was set up to work from home and didn't think about this as a regular thing, I think it was probably about 10 days in, March 13th, sent out a note letting people know that they could expense up to $500 for work from home needs. And we didn't limit it to, I think our limits were no firearms and no alcohol. We were very, very transparent. There were people
which in Texas, was maybe a little extra burden, but yeah.
Yep, it's fair. People have been very creative with how they've used it, but I think luckily as a company, we are financially able to do something like that. So again, I'm extraordinarily thankful for that. But our employees, I've seen standing desks, gel mats. Somebody bought a rabbit. There's coffee makers. It's like whatever is going to help them be more comfortable in this new, this temporary normal. To keep them engaged and make sure that we're taking care of them in the best way possible. Like, we can't see them in the office every single day. We're not going to have the chat in the kitchen. We're not going to have the happy hour in the office or lunch to spend time with them. But how do we make sure that we're still, as a company, because I think we do this, it's part of our DNA, is making sure that we take care of our employees as best we can. And that we still want to keep doing that. And so I think all these things, from the Parents and Caregivers Challenge to what work from home may look like for one person is different for others, and what those needs are, and just all of these resources that have come together very quickly to just try and help as best we can.
I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that you hinted at with the employee experience team and other groups, that what we've done to try to just lighten the load a little bit and create an environment where people can just feel connected and stay focused and actually be productive at work. And again, with the same caveat that we are extraordinarily fortunate that we have a business that can operate in this way. Everyone who might be watching this has close friends and family members who have lost work, who are part of businesses that just, whether it's travel or entertainment or retail, where there's just no business right now. So we're very aware of all the things that we're doing that might feel a little light and fun. Is a privilege that we get to do that, but it is important that we have a way where everyone can have a little bit of respite from some of these anxieties and worries. And with everyone being home as much as we are, it's clear that we all crave connection. And I know that I've found myself, and I've heard other people saying the same thing, connecting to people who are not at work and not in Austin in ways that, frankly, I could have been doing at any other time, but we're doing now. So my family sat down, last weekend with our really close friends in Utah and had dinner together and game night. And we just put our laptops on the table and we sat down to dinner at the same time. And then we played code names for 2 hours. We could do that anytime, but suddenly we're feeling like we need to connect. So one thing that we have seen is that remote workers and remote offices are connecting in new ways. And there are some things that we've been able to do that, frankly, we could have done at any time before, but this situation has created a kind of new set of connections. So I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's true. I think this is the way I described this to somebody the other day is like, this is the biggest forced social experiment of my lifetime. And it is the great equalizer because, to your point, there were some of us that were in office, some of us that were remote. You think about it, just my HR leadership team. There are 2 of us that are in New York, 3 of us actually that are in New York now. So we'd be in a conference room together on a meeting and everybody else would be dialing into Zoom on their own. We had bad behaviors. We would go on mute in the conference room and have a separate side conversation. And that can't happen today. You think about it, to me, it's been like interesting. I think technology is an amazing thing. Like I think the last 20 or 25 years have been, my life has changed. Everyone's life has changed for the better because of technology, but there are also some downsides to it. And I think this has forced people, like my husband and I have dinner. We've had dinner for 31 nights together. And we've been together. We celebrate 25 years together in June of this year. We probably will still be at home quarantined in June of this year. So we were talking about like, what are we going to do? But I don't know. And we both travel a lot. I don't know that we've ever spent 31 nights together. And it's different. Like there's no phones on the table at night, at dinner. And like we literally have a conversation and we have lots of conversations throughout the day. And I think the same has happened with our employees. Like I said this earlier, I've known these people as coworkers for, I've been at Indeed for 6 years, however long they've been at Indeed, and you get to know them and, you appreciate them as human beings, but now you're starting to get this glimpse into their personal life. And I just think this takes, at least from my perspective, my understanding of them as human beings to a different level. There's probably a greater respect and understanding now because you see like, oh, I didn't realize that, this person on this team had a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. And like, wow, like, I'm not sure, like, I have a hard enough time taking care of myself sometimes. And so it's like, I think just gives you a deeper perspective and a deeper understanding at a human level. And not only am I now connecting with people that I typically work with in New York, but like I was on a virtual lunch yesterday of a group of people. It was the compensation team, a couple in Austin, one in Dublin. Wasn't necessarily lunch, it was a dinner. One in New York. They were all over the place. And it's like, I've never, we've not ever been in the same location at one time to have lunch. And we all agreed, like, let's do this every 2 weeks on Thursday from 12:15 to 12:45. Okay, like I'm game, put it in my calendar. And it's just, I think it just has opened up. It's this equalizer, but that has opened up people's minds to, we don't have to live the way we've lived. Like your comment about the dinner. Drew and I had dinner with my sister and brother, and my sister-in-law and brother-in-law, Drew's sister and brother-in-law, who live in Columbus, Ohio, the other night. We last saw them at Christmas when we go home to see them. We go home to see my family in Florida. And I'm like, what a novel concept. Like, let's just do a Zoom dinner. And like, we had a great conversation. I'm like, we should just do this on a regular basis. Like, we don't need a pandemic to like keep in touch. There's also been a lot of checking in, which I think people care about people in general, but it's a heightened sense of, I want to make sure people are okay, both physically and mentally, and just checking in. I honestly hope that when we go back to being in offices and being in cities like Manhattan and Austin and kind of the cities that have really closed down here, that we take all the good stuff that we had before and all this new stuff that we've learned and put that all together to make the world, and I don't mean to be sappy, but to make the world a better place. Like, we can stay connected with anybody. We can have dinner with anybody because of Zoom and all the other video platform features. And I just really never thought about it that way before. And I think that's like, my hope is that's the good that comes out of all of this.
Yeah, and I think that's a great. I'm just looking at the clock here. The time flew. It's been almost an hour here, so we should probably wrap up. But I think that's a really beautiful way to kind of bring everything together. You know, I think the obvious things to observe in all of this, to me, number one is just the fragility of everything. You know, it's very easy to just skate through life and think that everything is going to be a certain way, and there are so many challenges that can happen, and people will be parsing for decades, you know, why we as a society and as a world were not better prepared for this, because there were a lot of people who were talking about these things, but how quickly whatever normal is, you know, the rug can get, you know, pulled out from under you, and this sort of this feeling of groundlessness that sort of everyone has been through. But the second thing that's really clear is just the interconnectedness. You know, what the phrase that we've been using internally here is, we're all in this together. And that's, you know, we're all in this together, but the whole world is all in this together. And when you look at how a pandemic works, it's because of how interconnected we are, and the speed with which this is happening compared to 1918 is because of how interconnected we are as a global society. So hopefully what this leads to is that we all have to work together to address this current problem, and then to make sure that we can start listening to some of the other things that people are talking about that might be challenges, and work together to solve them. Because the other thing that's really clear here is it's very difficult for one company to solve this problem, or a city or a state. I mean, it's going to require a lot of people agreeing that we're all in it together, and that we need to put together our resources to, as you said, make the world a better place. I could keep talking to you for hours. We do talk a lot, and I really just wanted to take this opportunity to give a chance, because you have done such an incredible job within Indeed of leading through what has been just a breathtaking set of circumstances changing day to day, and doing it in a way where, as you said, the most amazing thing is just how frequently people completely unsolicited have reached out to me to say thank you for everything that your team and all of the teams at Indeed have done. And you and I both know that it's very easy for a lot of people to complain about things. For the last 2 months, all I've heard is a series of thank yous, and here's something I'm dealing with. How do you think that we might address this challenge together? The last thing that I'll just say, just in terms of as a personal observation, you talk about how amazing it is how folks at Indeed have responded to this. So when we made that decision on Tuesday, 31 days ago, to work from home, and then we had that Wednesday, our first day work from home, and we did this global Q&A. That was the first global Q&A. We had more than 5,000 people on Zoom at the same time asking questions in an online forum for Dave and I, and then people had the ability to vote those questions up. The number one question with the most votes, the first question that we answered, that was the thing that was top of mind for Indeed employees all over the globe facing all of this uncertainty, was, hey, we have a bunch of contract workers in our office who clean the office and serve us coffee and do our catering. What are we going to do to take care of them? And that to me was the most profound thing, that in the face of all of this, the biggest question was not, how am I going to do this, or how are you going to take care of me, is how are we going to take care of other people? And that does say a lot about, I think, the culture that you've helped build here, and what you and your team have been able to do. So thank you.
It's humbling to work with a group of 10, and it's also 10,000 plus people. It's not like there's 100 of us. There are 10,000 people across the globe that work for this company, and that is what they wanted to talk about with our CEO and COO. So you're right. It's amazing and it's wonderful. And, I hope that we can, without the fear and anxiety, we can remember some of these things when we go back to whatever our normal life is in the future.
Great. Well, with that, thank you, Paul. Thank you to everyone from Indeed who might be watching. And again, our purpose here is to try to just share with anyone else who might be going through the same things at other companies, whether you've got 10 employees or 100,000 employees. If there's anything that we've done where we can be helpful, we hope that this conversation and some of these insights might be there. And maybe we can try to open up and share some of those resources that you've been sharing with some other folks. We are here to help. That is our mission as a company. We help people get jobs, and if we can help people navigate through these challenges here, then that will make us feel a little bit more like we're contributing to this thing that we're all in together. So thank you again, Paul, for your time. Thanks for anyone who's watching, and we'll see you next time. Take care.